I hope for some of you that I'm preaching to the choir, but for those of you who are dragged here kicking and screaming, I'm going to start off by giving a gentle warning. In this talk, I'm going to say some things that some people may find difficult to hear. I'm not going to swear, I always keep it family friendly, and I'm not going to be abusive. I'm going to say some bad things about your bad habits, but hopefully by the end of this talk, you'll be able to see the world from a different perspective. I hope you'll find this presentation engaging, entertaining, and helpful. But first of all, is being vegan and also being healthy a Sisyphean task? But what is a Sisyphean task? As punishment for tricking Zeus and cheating death, Hades made Sisyphus roll a huge boulder endlessly uphill in the underworld. However, because the boulder would always roll away from him, he would never reach the top. Futile tasks like this we now describe in modern culture as Sisyphean. I'm going to show that being healthy and vegan is not a Sisyphean task, but being vegan is actually the most healthy way to live. I'm going to cover a lot of information tonight in this presentation, probably more than you've ever heard before. My passion, my life purpose, is helping people help themselves get healthy and fit, and we also save the animals and the planet at the same time. Personally, I've now been vegan for 10 years, and the last piece of non-vegan food I remember buying was a cheese sandwich. For me, I'm vegan for the animals and not for health. However, as a positive consequence, you will become healthy when you become vegan. In this presentation, I'm going to show you the how and why. I specialize in coaching sustainable weight loss, and I do not promote calorie counting. As a positive consequence, you will improve your health on the lifestyle that I coach. The way I deal with people's bad health habits is through a controllable, money-saving, side-effect-free lifestyle based on the foods that I recommend and exercise in the form of cycling. I also show what peripheral factors are going to affect your health, such as having a social support circle of people in your life who will be there to help you get healthy. Sometimes I'm the only person that someone has in their life to motivate them to get healthy, and that's fine. I recommend exercise because your body is like a use it or lose it system. If you don't exercise your body to challenge your mitochondria, you will keep losing your mitochondria, and your body is not going to maintain them. This is a really bad thing, and I will show you the implications of why good mitochondrial health is so important in this presentation. I'm going to tell you things you may already know, but for a few of you, I might tell you information and you will think, hang on, that's not true. I encourage people not just to believe me, but after this presentation, go and do your homework. Jump on the internet, cross-check it with your heart, and follow your intuition, and use common sense. In society, we have lost the ability to critically think. We turn on the TV, we turn on the radio, we open the newspaper, and we look at social media and wait for a BBC program to tell us how to get fit and healthy. We watch generic shows like Today Tonight, which say bananas make you fat. If bananas made you fat, I would be obese. In fact, I would probably be the size of a small moon. But I'm always the leanest person in the room. In reality, I'm always the leanest person, always the healthiest, the fittest, and full of energy, even eating up to a dozen bananas a day. People say, dude, you must be nuts. No, but I am bananas. It's not dogma or idealism or ideology or some spiritual woo-woo rubbish. It's real stuff. We look at the planet today, we look at the hunger crisis, the obesity crisis, the cancer crisis, the heart disease, osteoporosis, diabetes crisis, depression crisis, drug usage, wars, famine, floods, and droughts. We're living in some pretty hardcore times, and the media wants us to walk around as though we're half asleep. And they tell you you've got the rest of your life to get it in order. But we don't. Life is short. The only time that matters is now. Just like the iconic line in Terminator 2, Judgment Day, the future is not set. There is no fate but what we make for ourselves. I commonly hear people excusing common chronic diseases with, oh well, it just runs in the family. His and her father had it too. People have been living the same way now for 5 or 6 more generations, doing the same bad habits that lead to disease of the body. Anyone is susceptible to the same diseases if father, son, and grandson behave the same way and don't break the cycle of ill health. Do you want to be part of the problem or part of the solution? I have never managed to get a single person to go vegan for the mercy of the animals. Not a single person. The same things I usually hear are, oh, but I'm an animal lover, or I don't care. For those people who say, I don't care, I have a problem, because we're just going to fight. I'm young, I have the energy, but already I think I'm starting to feel a bit weary from those who are committed to acting badly. In this presentation, I'm not going to go there. The appeal to someone to stop paying for the killing of animals without fail always falls on deaf ears. For this reason, I'm not going to waste my time appealing to all your good nature, because to be honest, I've never been able to find any. I'm not going to use any shock factors, because most people switch off when I show them an image of a baby sheep getting its head cut off. But don't worry, I'm not going to show any images like that tonight. The only reason I ever get someone to at least consider being vegan is for selfish reasons, to improve one's own personal health. And I can't judge you because I once consumed lots of dairy products. So for me, because I once consumed all these dairy products, if you are someone who's been challenged by someone like me about going vegan and you continue on your path unchanged, I will judge you. I'm going to call you a bad person. The reason I'm not going to talk about the animal side of veganism is because everyone knows what they're doing really. We go to the shops and we buy a piece of animal. When it finally comes to eat, you're eating an animal's leg or breast or its backside. You know that an animal had to die, but yet what do? We look down and we continue on doing the same thing. And if you think that your chicken comes from some green and pleasant land, it comes from factory farming. We've all seen the footage. What can I say other than please stop behaving badly? What is life without good health? Another good question I ask is, if I was going to die tomorrow, would I do what I'm about to do? We live in a monetary society where people are working jobs they hate to buy stuff they don't need, to impress people they don't even really like. We eat the same unhealthy foods as everyone else at lunch because everyone else is eating the meal deal, and you think, well, I just need to do that too. I think we can all relate to some degree to that paradigm. But why is losing weight and regaining your health so important? The reason why being healthy should be your top priority is because the more healthy you are, the more time you have to spend with the people you love. Being healthy does not mean living forever. We have the winning golden ticket called life. We get 100 years and there's nothing you can do about that, regardless of what you see on social media. What is important is what you do with the time that is given to you. If you live a lifestyle that is not based on health, your life quality will be poor and you'll end up dying prematurely. If you put health first, your life quality will improve and you may just end up enjoying your golden ticket of life. We are here to enjoy life. We are not here to suffer from disease. Most people are doing the whole money thing. I've got the latest BMW, I've got the latest Tesla, and things like that. I love cycling personally, and I've done a lot of bike racing. Whenever I say that I don't love cars, and in fact suggest we should use our cars less, I usually get looked at like I'm an alien from a distant galaxy. We live in a society that judges us on the acquisition of meaningless material items. My definition of richness is how you get to spend every minute of every day doing what you want, spending the times that you really care about. I recommend you do what you want with your life as long as it doesn't destroy the planet or harm animals. I'm here to help give people information and they can run with it and do whatever they want with it. When you go vegan, I'm not talking about this, okay? I'm not talking about just living off vegan burgers and vegan pizza. It is not swapping out a donut for a vegan donut. If you want to be healthy, then I would not recommend a high-fat and high-protein diet. A donut, okay, so I haven't got it up on there, but a donut is a high-fat food with a sprinkling of sugar in order to entice you to gobble down these disgusting rings of fat. But you can eat like this, and there is a term for this, and this is called being a fat vegan. We all have to agree that we must eat. The primary reason you eat is because we need energy. You may think you need vitamins, you may think you need fat, you may think you need protein, but the main reason you eat is to get energy, and these things just come along with it. So you can get energy from 3 sources, okay? So we can get it from fat, protein, or carbohydrate. And in general, the body is only going to burn carbohydrate and fat, and then under desperation, it will start to burn protein by pulling it from the muscles. To put this in perspective in terms of food, high fat and high protein foods are generally animal products, and high carbohydrate foods are generally plant products. So you have this choice, okay? So if you make the right choice in terms of your source of calories, you will do well. But if you make the wrong choice and you eat the high-fat processed vegan food that tries to replicate the high-fat animal products, you will do poorly, okay? So we don't want to be trying to mimic the high-fat foods, okay? So many people are suffering with their health. People who are suffering from chronic disease enter health hell, and it is very hard for them to get out of it. Just like hell in Dante's Inferno, one could imagine a different chronic disease for each of the circles of hell. I'm going to talk about how we can cure the growing sickness, and yes, you guessed it, it's by going vegan. Why are millions of people suffering from obesity, heart disease, cancer, diabetes, hypertension, atherosclerosis, kidney disease, and other chronic diseases? Why is our health so poor in the West? It's the food, okay? It's the food. All it comes down to is the food that people are eating. Which way do we interact with our environment the most? Is it from the air we breathe or from the water we drink? No, it's from the food we eat. The high-fat, high-animal protein diet that makes up the standard American diet or standard Western diet is toxic to the human body. The acronym for this diet is called SAD. And yes, it is sad because millions of people are destroying their health. We are essentially giving ourselves food poisoning. When we think about food being harmful, our first concern is that it will make us feel sick immediately after we eat. Perhaps you may follow the news and avoid the foods that cause food poisoning from E. coli and Salmonella that have been recalled due to contamination. If you had a chronic staphylococci or Salmonella poisoning and you were being poisoned with these microbes all the time, the way that you would cure it would be to stop the food poisoning. Plant foods do not grow human pathogens like mad cow or Salmonella listeria. The reason for this is because the plant and animal kingdoms are biologically different. That's fine. These pathogens are grown in animals, and the reason why we catch these pathogens is because we are animals. If a cow can grow E. coli, our genetic makeup and physiology is similar enough that that E. coli can jump over to us. However, we are distant enough from plants that plant diseases cannot jump over to us. You do not have any friends who suffer from Dutch elm disease or aphids. It's never going to happen, okay? The only reason that you ever find plant foods that have these pathogens is because they've been contaminated with feces containing microbes that affect our bodies. Almost all infections that spread to us, to people, come from animal products like milk or pigs and cows and chicken eggs. You only see a tiny amount of coverage in the news about these, and then it's gone. The food industry is out to make you believe nothing is safe to eat. The animal products that make most people ill get hardly any attention. But one little cabbage or tomato covered with E. coli, and you're going to hear about it for months. Well, stop and remember where that E. coli originally came from. It did not come from a plant. And this is often why, if you look on packaging, it will say wash before use. What do I mean when I keep referring to sick people? I'm not talking about people who've been in a car accident, for example. I'm referring to the millions of people who are suffering from chronic disease. These people see doctors. Healthy people don't. Going to the doctor doesn't make you healthy. In fact, in many cases, it may just end up doing the opposite. Going to the doctor can be dangerous to your health, as even common drug prescriptions always have negative side effects. Healthy people don't take drugs, and healthy people don't get surgery. Sick people take drugs, sick people have surgery to treat chronic disease. Healthy people care what they're putting in their bodies. Healthy people think about the type of food they eat. If you want to be healthy, then I recommend taking responsibility for your own health and not waiting for a miracle cure. You need to start making changes to your diet, your lifestyle, and also your thinking. You should pride yourself on being healthy. When you get healthy, you will be able to free up your life by cancelling all the doctor appointments, which is great, isn't it? The rich Western diet, rich in fat and high in animal protein, is killing us. This was the food of the kings and queens of history, and this is the food that I call poison. How would you kill a human humanely? I think we're killing people humanely with the high-fat Western diet. Anyone here heard of the Endurance? Anyone heard of that? So this was Shackleton's trip to the Antarctic, and the men on the expedition were eating tomatoes out of lead cans, and they were suffering from lead poisoning. And these were explorers of the Antarctic well over 100 years ago now. So well over, more like 120, 130 years ago now. And their ship called the Endurance, so that's their ship up there. So this sunk in the Antarctic, and they were trapped. And all they had were lead cans. And pretty soon, they all started losing their hair, and their fingernails started to fall out. They were suffering from lead poisoning, a type of food poisoning. But as soon as their doctor discovered what was happening, he stopped the men from eating the tomatoes out of the lead cans, and within a couple of weeks, they were totally fine. People are suffering from, and hopefully by the end of this presentation, you will look at it from the same point of view that I do. What people are suffering from in our society is food poisoning. But it's food poisoning on such a grand scale, it far exceeds any lead poisoning, tobacco poisoning, cocaine or heroin poisoning, alcohol poisoning, all the poisonings you could imagine. All the poisons you can imagine are insignificant compared to the food poisoning going on now in terms of the toll that it takes on you personally, your family, your community, this nation, and planet Earth. And the way we stop this food poisoning, first and foremost, you have to recognize it as food poisoning. And if you don't, you're helpless. You're helpless if you don't recognize it. This is food poisoning, okay? So two-thirds of people, according to current statistics, suffer from food poisoning in this form. They are overweight or obese, and of course this is associated with more heart disease, breast cancer, colon cancer, more prostate cancer, and this is also how you get type 2 diabetes. So food poisoning results in being overweight, obesity, and also the secondary manifestations that you see so commonly in our society. This is food poisoning. Okay, so type 1 and type 2 diabetes is food poisoning. And if you stop the food poisoning, people with type 2 diabetes are cured. But people with type 1 diabetes are only greatly benefited, but you can never cure type 1 diabetes. But you can reverse type 2 diabetes. Heart disease is the leading cause of death of women and men in the civilized Western world. Around 640 million people are suffering from heart disease on this planet. Breast, colon, and prostate cancer, these are also all due to food poisoning. Everyone knows about the purple pill. Why does everyone know about gourd, indigestion, and Nexium, the purple pill? It's because we have massive food poisoning out there. You could go into any pharmacy and you will see these pills all over the Western world. So this is also food poisoning. So now that you recognize it and stop and think about it, even if there's any hint in your mind that what I say is true, what you're thinking right now is every place I look, I see food poisoning. All through my family, my school, through my business, every place I look, people are suffering from food poisoning. Well, they are. The only way you're going to fix it is to stop this food poisoning. Just like Shackleton and his men with lead poisoning over 100 years ago, they stopped eating out the lead cans, the men's body healed, and the food poisoning, it went away. This food poisoning has also been recognized for thousands of years. We could go back 4,000 years ago and look at the priestesses and the pharaohs, the kings and queens of the Middle East of Egypt. You look at these mummified remains of these aristocrats from 4,000 years ago with modern scanning technology and see that even they suffered from the same food poisoning that we see today. So they found in scans that atherosclerosis is actually common in these mummified human beings. And also in the aristocrats from 300, 400, or 500 years ago, for example, the kings and queens of the past were fat, had gout, and also had diabetes. They suffered from food poisoning. So 4,000 years ago, or even 400 years ago, there were only a rich few wealthy enough to poison themselves with rich food. But today, we have a society, thanks to the Industrial Revolution, modern technology, and fossil fuels, everybody in the Western society can afford to and does poison themselves with rich foods like Burger King, Dairy Queen, and Imperial Margarine. So the fat Western diet is food poisoning. But how do we fix it? We can fix it, okay? We can fix it. What I've come to realize is that if I tell someone they have to do better, or they have to be sensible, they have to be reasonable, they have to cut down, nobody ever gets better. If you realize that you're suffering from food poisoning, and the food poisoning is causing acne, chest pain, breast lumps, indigestion, and constipation, if you realize it in yourself, if you recognize it in your friends or your family, you have to stop the food poisoning. You can't cut down, you have to cut it out 100%. 100%. I found that people cannot cut down They can't be reasonable and they can't be prudent. They have to deal with it in the same poisoning, the same way that some of us have had to deal with tobacco poisoning or alcohol poisoning. We have to change our behavior and stop 100%. Every day when you wake up, you should start the day with, I will not eat meat. I will not eat animal products. One should think of it like the recanting of a religious scripture. Thou shalt be a low-fat vegan. Thou shalt not eat meat. There are very few of us who can be moderate. To have the same kind of personality as me, I love eating, to have someone to tell me to moderate, sorry, but it's not going to happen. If you want to do the same thing with food and get over obesity, and constipation and indigestion, for example, to change your future, you have to do what Nancy Reagan told us to do. Does anyone here remember what Nancy Reagan said to the drug addicts? Does anyone remember? She said, and there's nothing in between, you just have to say no. Okay, so it's plain and simple. This is food poison. You may not recognize it as food poison, but it is. Start thinking of it in those terms. So how many people here have cats? Does anyone have a cat? Okay. So to your cat, this is food, okay? This is food to your cat. Your cat, it would take this particular food source, it would defeather it, tear it open, and eat it, because that is a cat's food. But this is not your food, okay? This is not a human food. When you try to eat this food that the cat does well with, you get sick. And also, I need to mention here as well, as an important side note, most of the antibiotics that are used in the world are used in animal agriculture and not given to humans. So they're given to livestock because the conditions, like this, the conditions are so poor that disease is very common. And as a consequence of this, we are rapidly moving into a world with antibiotic resistance. The overuse of antibiotics is being driven from the pharmaceutical industry to breed billions of animals every year just to kill them for the flesh, for the pleasure of their flesh, for a sandwich. We are poisoning ourselves, and the cherry on the cake at the same time, we're making antibiotics useless. Isn't that ridiculous? This is food poison. Oil is food poison. You must recognize it as that. So there's just two large groups of food that you have to say no to, and those are animal products and those are oils. So this may be hard for some people to believe, to think that olive oil is toxic, because everyone's told me it's good for me, right? Flaxseed oil, well, that's got to be good for me as well. Fish oil, that's great for me, isn't it? No, it's not. It's giving you acne, obesity, and greasy skin. It promotes cancer, and we've known that since the 1920s, that these vegetable oils are strong promoters of cancer, heart disease, and all kinds of problems. There's also another thing about these olive oils and other oils, is they increase clotting factor 7. So they increase your chance of your blood clotting, and these oils increase the arteries getting plugged up. So let me just ask you to think about it for a minute. When you pour oil, maybe all over your salad, where do you think that oil goes? Do you think it just evaporates out your ears? Do you think it kind of just, disappears someplace when no one's looking? Well, no. When you eat fat, you wear it on your skin and under your skin. You need to always remember this very important point. The fat you eat is the fat you wear. Fat is efficiently stored from your lips to your hips. Do you really want to look like the Michelin Man? So now you have someone standing in front of you telling you a message that you've probably heard over and over again. You're not supposed to eat meat, butter, and eggs or cheese. You've heard this before, but now you're thinking, well, what am I going to do? There's nothing for me to eat otherwise. It's like someone telling you that you're not supposed to breathe air or drink water anymore. You will say, but I'm going to die. But you're not meant to breathe dirty air. You're not meant to drink dirty water. However, you can breathe clean air, clean water, and you can also eat clean food. So me just telling you that you can't eat animal products and you can't eat oils leaves some of you with this big vacuum. And you think that you're not going to survive. You might say, I've been eating these foods all my life, but what you should be thinking is, I have been poisoning myself all my life. This is until I tell you what you're meant to eat. Okay, you ready for it? This is what we're meant to eat. You are meant to eat starch and fruit. You are a starch and fruit eater. Until you figure that out, you're lost. You are totally out of control. You're hungry. You can't understand why every time you eat, you gain weight. Why every time you eat, your stomach hurts. You can't understand why you don't have any energy. You can't understand why the picture won't come together for you until you realize and understand that you are a starch eater. Okay, just to explain, starches are the parts of plants that store a large amount of energy for the plant. Plants take carbon dioxide from the air, water from the ground, and they absorb sunlight for energy. They use this energy to convert carbon dioxide and water into sugar called glucose. Plants make glucose for their own needs so they can run their body parts like leaves and stems. Then the plant takes some of that energy and it stores it for use later on, and that use is when the plant becomes anew. So the plant is growing in the summer and autumn, and then winter comes, the plant dies, and then next year, the plant has to become a new plant. It needs genetic material, but it also needs energy to sprout. The plant during its growing season will make the sugar glucose, and it stores glucose in long chains known as starch. Not complex carbohydrate, starch. The plant then takes this starch and stores it in their plant parts so they have energy for the new plant when the spring comes. When the new season comes, the potato sprouts into a new plant from the stored energy. A plant can also store that energy above ground in the forms of seeds called grains and legumes. These high sugar seeds, like beans, peas, lentils, wheat, corn, rice, and so on, they store the energy above ground so that when the new season comes and the genetic material lands on the ground, it has the energy to become a new corn plant, for example. Uniquely, as human beings, you tap into this stored energy, and I mean uniquely as human beings. We're sugar eaters. Always have been and always will be. So this right here, this is the way you solve food poisoning. You substitute all that fat, which is from animal products or vegetable oils, you substitute that source for sugar, which is in starch in plants and simple sugars in fruits. And the reason you need the sugar is because you need energy. You need to be able to chase the 2-year-old around or keep up with your kids. You need to be able to make it to work and also to perform in life. Okay. So some of you are probably maybe thinking about changing your diet. But what you need to know is that this diet that I'm talking about is the diet that winners eat. Since 1968, the long-distance endurance competitions for the Olympics have been dominated by 2 groups of people. They've come in the first 4 places in the Olympics, and those people are from Kenya and Ethiopia. People always wonder, how can they run for so long with such endurance? It's because they live off corn and other starch staples. The most competitive of all people throughout history particularly in the long distance events, have been sugar eaters. And also, you can't outrun a bad diet, okay? You can't outrun a bad diet. Even if you think you're doing well with your health by running regularly, if your diet is unhealthy, it will always catch up with you. For some of your friends and relatives, when you tell them that you're giving up meat, what they're going to wonder is, well, where do you get your strength? Now, this is a story of gladiators. So gladiators historically are known as the barley men. Gladiators won their competitions in the Colosseum thanks in large part to the way they ate. Gladiators ate barley and beans because you didn't get to come back twice. If you weren't really good, you were done, okay? They ate a low-fat, high-carbohydrate food which allowed these slaves to perform at their best. But all of this shouldn't come as a surprise to any of you who have studied history. Starch in the form of a potato has supported the worldwide pillars of nutrition in Europe since the 1600s and in South America for at least 10,000 years. For populations in Russia and Poland and also Ireland, all they had were potatoes. And historically, when this food source failed, millions suffered and millions of people died in the Irish potato famine. Sugar is rocket fuel for your body. If you want to fuel your exercise, or as I call it, having fun while moving your body, then white table sugar is rocket fuel for human beings. So here is an example of one of my training rides. I completed, for example, in this example, I completed this 3-hour training ride at an average speed of 36 kilometers an hour, or 22.4 miles per hour average speed, on just a standard road bike. And no, I didn't need an ambulance to take me to hospital after this ride. I got home, stepped off my bike, took in a deep breath, and then went inside for dinner. And if you're wondering what I had as a recovery fuel, I had a big bowl of white rice. Chronic disease is completely misunderstood by the public and most healthcare professionals. Chronic disease is not caused by one single meal. It's from 1,000 little cuts accumulating over several decades. What you might not realize is that many of the foods you consume without suddenly feeling ill can be equally risky or even more so over the long haul. Animal products are a slower type of poison. They are every bit as dangerous as the ones that let you know right away that you've made a big mistake. You may never suspect that these foods are the culprit when you become ill with heart disease, cancer, or inflamed joints as much as 4 decades later. The long lag between consuming these harmful foods and noticing the symptoms fools most people. It fools them into believing that they are safe. In fact, the overabundance of protein, fat, and particularly methionine, a sulfur-containing amino acid, and cholesterol in these foods leads us down a dangerous path. And you need to know this as well. Some of you might not know this, but doctors are not taught nutrition at medical school. So if you walked into any doctor's office in the Western world and you asked them, "Doctor, do you think that diet has anything to do with the illnesses of your patients?" Most doctors are going to reply with, "Absolutely not. And I'm sure of this because I went to one of the best medical schools in my country, and if it was important, they would have talked about it." Most doctors are actually also in the dark on nutrition, just like their patients. Almost all diseases in the West are coronary artery disease, diabetes, arthritis, and cancer, all of which are mainly dietary diseases. These are all called chronic because conventional medicine never cures them. Conventional medicine gives people pills and they never get cured. To be cured, means that you don't take any more pills. And to understand this for your future, you need to know there has never been a reported case of diabetes cured with drugs. There has never been a reported case of heart disease cured with conventional medicine. 0. This may sound a bit scary and doom and gloom for some people, but there is an alternative. There is a very powerful medicine we can use to treat and reverse chronic disease. Diet. Diet is the most powerful way to treat chronic disease. And the best example of this was the rice diet. So Walter Kempner, he treated over 19,000 patients at Duke University in North Carolina with the rice diet from 1939 until his retirement in 1974. Kempner had better results treating hypertension, diabetes, and kidney disease in the 40s and 50s, in the 1940s and 1950s, than we do today 60 years later. So here it is. Here's the rice diet. The rice diet consisted of white rice, fruit juice, and white table sugar. Among the multitude of different chronic diseases that Walter Kempner cured was type 2 diabetes. Okay, you ready for this? Kempner cured diabetes with sugar. I'll say that again. He cured type 2 diabetes with white table sugar. This was a vegan, low-fat, low-protein, high-carbohydrate diet. And this is the breakdown of the ratio of different macronutrients on the rice diet compared to a standard American diet. Kempner also treated people before the modern pharmaceutical industry. That meant he had to get the diet right because there was no second chances to fall back on with drugs like metformin. At the time, this was famous. People came from all around the world to be treated at what were called the rice houses in North Carolina. Sorry about the noise. Is it? Yeah. They're not coming here, unfortunately. However, has anyone here heard of Walter Kempner? Has anyone heard of Walter Kempner? So no one that I ever meet has ever heard of this. This amazing work that happened without drugs. It's all being forgotten. Now all you're told is that sugar's bad, sugar makes you fat, sugar's diabetes, sugar is literally cancer. Instead, fat, the cause of so much suffering and death in the Western world, is actually getting promoted. This incredible work right here is the last thing that the modern healthcare system wants you to know about. This right here in front of you, this is the truth. If everyone knew the truth, then the modern healthcare system would collapse. And the reason why it would collapse is because there would be no more sick people to give pills to. I'd definitely go and look this up after you've watched this. Most likely, the only reason why you've ever heard of a vegan diet is because you've been told it's unhealthy. Maybe through marketing, word of mouth, or maybe your very own family doctor. It's not a conspiracy. We live in a monetary system called a plutocracy. This is a society that is governed by the wealthy. Those that have power make the rules for all of us. Most people just do what everyone else does because naturally human beings are herd animals. The God of popular opinion dictates that most people will not go against the norms of society, and in this case, eating the same foods that everyone's eaten since childhood. Why are there so many celebrities, healthcare professionals, and marketing promoting high-fat foods if they're meant to be bad for our health? It's simply all about money. It's that simple. Money is the new religion, the supreme God, and most people will say, and they will do anything for money. The foods that make the most money are the rich animal products and not the foods of the peasants, like white rice. I didn't know this was happening, by the way, when I looked this whole. You've probably never looked at it before, but the next time you go to the supermarket, the next time you're doing your shopping, go to the fruit and vegetable aisles. Just kind of look around, just take it in and smell it. Then do the same thing in the meat aisle. Go and have a look around. And if you haven't done it yet, if you're not there, then someday you will be. You will be nauseated and sickened by the time you get to the end of the meat aisle. Here is the industrial complex that is keeping you unhealthy. All these industries intertwine to generate the largest industrial complex on the planet, second only to the industrial military complex. The high fat and high animal protein products that most people eat several times every day over decades make people sick. When the consequences of these foods, such as heart disease, start to raise their ugly head in middle age, you will go to your doctor. You will be given a pill. The only mention of diet from your healthcare provider is that you should eat a balanced diet or a Mediterranean diet or everything in moderation. But this is the reason that you're sick. As a result, you will then go back to your doctor for another drug. As these drugs start to become less and less effective, you will then be sent for surgery. For heart disease, firstly, you'll get a stent fitted, and then eventually coronary artery bypass grafting, also known as CABG in the industry, and this is open heart surgery. Food products that generate the most amount of money are the ones you see advertised the most. These companies have the largest marketing departments. Whenever you see new claims about the health benefits of a certain food, most science, a food product, you have to look where the funding for the research comes from, okay? Most science in the 21st century is fake food science. By that, I mean many of the papers that are being published showing supposed health benefits for a certain food industry, they also receive funding from that same industry. A perfect example of this is olive oil. It's not good for your health, okay? It's not good. Olive oil is, however, good for developing heart disease and therefore good for the medical business. Universities exist on the funding they receive from donors. For example, if a university receives funding from the dairy industry to build a new wing for that university, the research that's carried out in that building is not going to publish negative research about the dairy industry. And also, I just wanted to point out a very interesting thing that most people don't realize. You see this arrow, crude oil, petrochemicals, pharmaceutical industry. The pharmaceuticals that we get promoted, the drugs that we see, if you trace it back, they're essentially from crude oil. So whenever you get a drug or an injection, you're basically getting refined crude oil. I don't know if any of you have ever thought about it that way before. I coach the low-fat, low-protein, high-carbohydrate, vegan lifestyle. I call it the freedom lifestyle as it helps you to free yourself from disease. We're all hoping that there's going to be some sort of fountain of youth. We walk in one side, a bit overweight and sick, and then we come out the other side, youthful, strong, and lean. The closest thing we have to this is the understanding of nutrition toxicology. But firstly, I have been asked personally several times, why do I teach the crazy vegan stuff? Why bother with the low-fat message? No one is ever going to listen to you. The way I see it is if you want to see good things happen in the world, then you want to create a ripple effect. Each person doing a good thing ripples out and affects other people, and so on and so on. And the world becomes a better place for everybody if we all try to do what's right. Each person in their own individual setting influences people around them, and that influences people around them, and that leads to things getting better for everybody. But the opposite is also true. The world can also become a worse place for everybody. For most people, the basics of nutrition are quite simple to understand. For most people, they've had so much conflicting information from their childhood that it prevents them from understanding. So what are your health options? You have two to choose from, and if you don't like what you hear, as Plato said, he who tells the truth is most hated. Number one, plan A. You can become a low-fat, low-protein, high-carbohydrate vegan with no oils, no alcohol, and preferably eat organic when you can. That is your best chance to be lean, healthy, age well, and also look good for your age. However, there's also plan B, door number 2. This is the one that almost everybody is taking, even including doctors. Even doctors are suffering from heart disease and cancer. So what is door number 2? Keep on eating animal products and oils. You're most likely going to end up fat, diabetic, and suffer hypertension. You're going to plug up the arteries systematically throughout the body. So in men, you plug up the arteries in the genitals and you get impotence. In the heart, you plug up the arteries and you get AFib, congestive heart failure, angina, and myocardial infarction. Plug up the arteries in the brain and you get cognitive decline from silent strokes. Plug up the arteries and you increase your likelihood of getting cancer. What you want to do is you want to get your act together and excuse me. What you want to do is get your act together and become a low-fat vegan as soon as possible. Why? Because you want to keep your arteries open, okay? You want to keep them open. And this means that things are going to work as well as they're going to work. If you get on the meat and the oil processed food routine, you're going to get drug after drug after drug. And this is all the medical healthcare system ever does. But because those drugs don't really work, you are next sent for surgery. Now it's time for dangerous, intrusive surgery, which is going to be very painful. Now you're constantly going to visit the pharmacy and you will eventually die prematurely. This is not the way I advise, but it is the way 99% of people are choosing. To be or not to be. You are here to be or not to be low-fat vegan, a low-fat, high-carbohydrate vegan. You can either do the healthy stuff or not. It's not difficult. I recommend keeping life simple. Live like Adam and Eve in the garden of vegan, okay? Garden of vegan, but with central heating. It's that easy. One of the reasons we're still involved in this massive puffer, saturated fat, and cholesterol poisoning is because of marketing. This is just business. The reason that this continues with your friends and your relatives is because business is acting like business. And what business does is it tries to sell its products. One of the ways that a business sells its product is to find something special about its product and then market it to death. In this case, your death. It's called unique positioning. They take something special about their particular car or computer, or in this case, food industry, or food product, sorry. You see, it's just good business. And it is with the food industry. They take something unique about their product and they advertise it whether or not it's true. It's just good business. For example, the food industry has taken protein and advertised it to the point where everyone believes that you must eat what to get protein? Meat? Yes, meat. The first thing your friends will say when they find out you're going vegan is, where do you get your protein? I've looked at the scientific literature that's been published over the last 120 years. I want you to know there is no such thing as dietary protein deficiency. You've never had a friend who's had it. You've never had a relative who's suffered dietary protein deficiency. Dietary protein deficiency has never been reported in any circumstance, experimental or historical, anywhere in the world. Nowhere. It's never been reported on any diet that was sufficient in calories. It does not exist. One last time, there's no such thing as dietary protein deficiency. Another position that a food company takes has to do with calcium. If I say calcium, you say milk? Milk, yes, milk. There's never been a report of dietary calcium deficiency ever on any diet that is sufficient in calories. In other words, those populations that are lived on rice with no dairy, you know what? No calcium deficiency reported because it does not exist. And before you say, what about starving people? Well, you've answered your own question. People who are starving are suffering from calorie deficiency, and I'm talking about protein deficiency on a natural calorie sufficient diet. Where do you think the cow got its dietary calcium from? Grass, right, it gets it from the grass. So it got it from eating plants because bioavailable calcium comes from the soil. All these minerals come from rocks of the earth. Through weathering, these minerals build up in the soil, which is what all plants grow in. The elements that are in the earth come from incredible temperature and pressure of an exploding star that created a huge dust cloud of material that eventually ended up forming our solar system. The minerals in milk, they do not come from the stomach of a cow. They come from a supernova, okay? The amount of times I've always had people tell me it's all about the cow. If I say omega-3 fat, you say fish. Yeah, fish. What you need to understand is that no fish has ever made omega-3 fat. No animal has ever made omega-3 fat. No animal can desaturate at the 3-carbon position to create an omega-3 fat. No pig, no cow, no sheep, no chicken, no fish, no lobster. They can't do it. Only plants can desaturate at the 3-carbon position. Only plants can make omega-3 fats. Alpha-linoleic acid, ALA, is termed an essential fatty acid because humans lack the desaturate enzymes required for insertion of a double bond at the 3rd carbon position. But yet everyone knows that if you don't eat fish, you'll get omega-3 fatty acid deficiency. So here you have 3 warnings not to change your diet, because you'll become protein deficient, you'll become calcium deficient, and you'll become omega-3 deficient. You will, except it's never happened. There's no such thing. Everybody is living under this delusion, this misinformation. And until you understand that a sugar-based diet of fruit and starches supplies all the calcium, all the vitamins, all the minerals, all the essential fats, everything you need, you are impaired in your ability to solve the food poisoning. Are we carnivores? What do you think? No, we're not. We don't look anything like that, do we? No. So that is what you should and shouldn't eat. Now we're going to get on to the really important stuff of why. Firstly, I recommend eating vegan because this means you're going to eat low on the food chain. This is the Brazilian poison dart frog. They do not produce their own poison, but instead they bioaccumulate toxins from their diet. They then secrete this poison through their skin and can be extremely toxic to humans. Poison dart frogs that are bred in captivity are not poisonous. This is because they are fed a diet that does not contain toxins. The Industrial Revolution marked a shift into modern times. The modern world depends on the synthesizing of oil into petrochemicals for consumer goods, industry, and agriculture. As a consequence of progress, we are progressively making this planet hostile to life. We've polluted the air, the soil, the rivers, the lakes and the oceans with toxins from modern life. As you move up the food pyramid, the toxins bioaccumulate from one species to the next. When animals eat plants, over the animal's lifetime, those toxins are going to accumulate in its flesh. And then when you eat animal products, you're going to consume the equivalent of a lifetime's worth of toxins in just 15 minutes. Starches and fruit are low in environmental poisons. This is because these environmental contaminants are fat soluble. So they get sucked up in fat. And of course, these are low-fat foods. This doesn't mean that starches and fruit won't have chemicals because of the practice of spraying, but you can scrub off and you can peel off the outer layer, which has most of the chemical contamination. This is also why I do not recommend eating fish. We treat the rivers, the lakes, and the oceans as great big sewers, so they're all full of toxic chemical contaminants. It is common for people to suffer from methylmercury poisoning from eating fish as a result of mercury runoff from mining and industry. We drag out the oceans between 1 to 3 trillion fish, that's with a T, trillion fish, a year. Between 1950 and 1992, commercial fishing used drift nets that were 50 miles wide. 50 miles wide. And they were banned in 1992 by the UN. So I think now you can only use ones that are 2.5 miles wide. If you believe that we must get omega fats from fish, we condemn the last remaining fish to extinction. And then I have to ask you, where are you going to get your omega fats when there's no more fish? Will it take the extinction of life in the oceans to realize what we have done to this planet? When I say eat a high carbohydrate diet, I always hear the same thing. Well, that's going to cause diabetes, a metabolic disease. This is not true. I've heard the same low IQ soundbite repeated from most people I have ever met, from doctors, biochemists, and even PhD sport nutrition scientists. Your metabolism is sugar. Your body combines carbohydrate in the form of glucose and oxygen in the mitochondria to make ATP. The delusion that carbohydrate is bad is a universal theme, as most people in society have been conditioned and brainwashed into believing a lie. The body runs on sugar. Every cell in the human body runs on sugar. Every cell. Glucose is the molecule of all life on this planet. So just take a moment to take that in, okay? Just take a moment to think about that. Glucose sugar is the molecule that powers all life on this planet. Glucose is used to make ATP, and ATP is the chemical energy that powers all your cells. ATP is the currency of a human cell. Imagine ATP as a £20 note that is used to pay for all day-to-day transactions in society. Without it, society collapses, and so this is with your health. ATP is first made by the primary energy system called glycolysis, which is very inefficient, but it does not require oxygen. This is anaerobic respiration, also known as fermentation. Red blood cells do not have mitochondria and therefore rely exclusively on sugar to make ATP. Again, just think about that for a second. This molecule that is so demonized in society is what powers every cell in your body, and therefore is the reason why you are all alive right now, listening to me give this life-changing presentation. Your brain is running on sugar, your immune system is running on sugar, and where does sugar come from? It comes from plants. It comes from plants, and more specifically, starch and fruit. ATP is then made by the mitochondria, which is very efficient and produces a vast amount of ATP, mainly in the electron transport chain, which is where protons and electrons are used when it splits the hydrogen atom. This is a mitochondria. This is where energy comes from for all animal life on Earth. The mitochondria is like a nuclear power plant that chops the hydrogen in half. It splits the atom. This remarkable, tiny little thing inside your cell, 1 micron across, about the same size as bacteria cells, splits the hydrogen into protons and electrons. Could you imagine if you gathered together all the greatest scientific minds and asked them to create a nuclear power plant that is the same size as an E. coli bacterium and only produces water as a waste product? They would say, "Yeah, right, you're an idiot, get out." You will be laughed out all the greatest universities of the world. The mitochondria makes tons and tons of energy. They are the reason you are alive and why multicellular life is possible on this planet. The mitochondria is the foundation of life and at the center of all. Mitochondria are used to create a proton gradient. Exercise is essential to keep you healthy. When you move your body through exercise, you maintain good mitochondrial function. When you go for a bike ride, you don't just activate the mitochondria in your muscles, you activate them in your brain. Studies have shown that exercise increases the production of new mitochondria in the brain. Mitochondrial function is improved because exercise and movement go hand in hand. The reason you have a brain is so you can walk down a path in a forest or a jungle or across the prairie and survive. Why do you all think that animals have a brain but plants don't? It's quite obvious if you think about it. It's because animals move. So as soon as you move, you have to make a value judgment. I shall go to the fruit tree over there and get some sugar, but I shall avoid those wolves over there because I want to avoid trouble. Most of your brain is dedicated to seeing things, movement, and then making value judgments on what to do with this information. This is why I always say life is movement. Your mitochondria are the reason you are alive. So you want healthy mitochondria. You don't need lots of money. You need lots of mitochondria to be happy. Proton gradient is the holy grail. The simple first cells of life on this planet used a proton gradient to create life. The understanding of a proton gradient is fundamental to life. This is the origin of life as used by mitochondria, as used by photosynthesis, and used by bacteria. When one side of a membrane has more protons than the other side, the difference represents a source of energy that can be harnessed to do work. You might all, maybe you're remembering some of this from school, maybe? Here is an equation to show you that photosynthesis, taking CO2 and water to make glucose and releasing oxygen as a waste product, is the opposite of human metabolism. Human metabolism is cellular respiration. That takes glucose and oxygen, and produces CO2 and water as a waste product. This is what you need to care about. The energy from the sun, it's transferred to us via plants. They convert sunlight into sugar. We take this glucose and we use it to power all our cells. Humans and plants go together, okay? Humans and plants go together, okay? We go together like yin and yang, okay? Life runs on proton gradients in bacteria, chloroplasts in plants, and mitochondria in eukaryotes, which is what we are. When you have a cell and you want to have life, there has to be an osmotic balance between the inside of a cell and the outside of a cell. This means you have to pump, this is going to get a bit complicated now, so keep listening. This means you have to pump out calcium and sodium from within the cell. Now you have to pump potassium and magnesium into the cell, as these are the key counterbalancing ions. Now you have an osmotic balance. In the plasma membrane of your cells, ATP powers the sodium-potassium ATP pump. This pump is the equivalent of an electrical battery. It brings 2 potassium in and it pumps out 3 sodium. This makes the inside of the cell, more negative. This creates a resting membrane potential of negative 65 millivolts. This is called an electrical gradient, as the more positive sodium wants to come back into the cell. You have charge separation across a membrane barrier. You have the flow of charge. This is what an electrical battery is, and this electrical battery produces energy to maintain our cells. We are meant to eat tons of potassium for the running of these batteries. And where do we find potassium? Bananas and rice. We find them in plant foods. And also, why is magnesium important? Magnesium regulates calcium ion channels. This then allows calcium to enter the cell. However, the most important role magnesium plays is actually stabilizing ATP. This molecule that I keep mentioning, and you've probably heard of before, is actually magnesium ATP. Without the positive charge of a magnesium, the negative charge created by the neighboring oxygen molecules would tear ATP apart. And where do you find magnesium? Anyone know? It's at the center of chlorophyll in plants. Again, in plants, in plants, in plants. The protons that I mentioned earlier that come from the hydrogens that are ripped off from glycolysis are pumped into the intermembrane space. The electrons are then passed down a series of proton carriers to oxygen, which is the ultimate electron acceptor because it has a very high electronegativity. Then hydrogens are added and you get water as a waste product, as a harmless waste product. The energy from the higher pressure of protons, so the protons are getting pumped out of the cell into the outside of the cell. The higher pressure of protons are then harvested by traveling back through an enzyme called ATP synthase. So all the hydrogens, they're being pumped out, okay? And then as they're pumped out, the electrons that come off those hydrogens get passed down these proton carriers in the membrane of your cell. And then that energy is then harnessed through this enzyme here. So this enzyme here is like a nanomotor, okay? This is like biological motor, and this spins thousands of times a minute. So these nanomotor machines spin faster than a jet engine. Faster than a jet engine, inside all of the trillions of cells in your body. They do this to produce ATP from ADP. And just as a side note, this is the reason why these incredible machines, they're so incredible and beautiful that most people cannot comprehend and understand why this is even possible. And this is often why biochemists believe in God. This is the reason, in case you're wondering why scientists ever believe in God. It's because of this. To prevent hypertension, you need to have a K factor of at least 5. This means having at least 5 times more dietary intake of potassium than sodium. Fruits and starches have good K factor. Animal products have poor K factors. Having lots of potassium will dilate, so open up your blood vessels, increasing the efficiency of blood flow and increasing the supply of oxygen to your cells. Nitric oxide is the most important vasodilator in the human body. Oral nitrates in plant foods are converted into nitric oxide. When you eat plant foods, bacteria on the back of your tongue convert nitrate into nitrite, which the body then converts to nitric oxide. When you brush your teeth with toothpaste that contains fluoride, you are killing these bacteria. So this is also why I do not recommend using fluoride-containing toothpaste. I also recommend getting at least a carbon filter, preferably a reverse osmosis filter, for your water supply to remove fluoride from your water. You don't want to be drinking that stuff. The main use of that of fluoride is just to sterilize water, and after that you do not want to be drinking that. Okay? I could make a whole nother lecture on that in itself, but we'll just leave it there for now. When you eat saturated fat from animal products, you will increase your LDL cholesterol. LDL cholesterol is a bridging molecule that causes red blood cells to stick together. Red blood cells on the outer surface have a glycocalyx. These are essentially sugar and amino acid molecules. These molecules create a negative charge. Because of this negative charge, red blood cells normally would repel each other. And this is called a zeta potential. A typical red blood cell is 7 micrometers, but a capillary is smaller and is usually only 5 micrometers in diameter. Red blood cells therefore have to deform, okay, they have to deform to pass through these capillaries. When red blood cells stick together, this is called a rouleau formation. This is a French term that means like a stack of coins. Under the microscope, when red blood cells stick together, it looks like someone has made a stack of little red coins. When red blood cells stick together, this makes it much harder for them to get through the capillaries, so they make the blood thicker. This increases blood viscosity. When blood is more viscous, it is harder to pump through capillaries. As a consequence, blood pressure increases. The heart is now pumping a solution more like a milkshake rather than water. Blood is not the same as water. Water is a non-Newtonian fluid. Water is the same stationary as it is at motion, and blood is not. If you leave a cup of water and a cup of blood on a table and you leave them, the blood will start to aggregate, whereas the water remains unchanged. The blood will start to aggregate, it will form a progressively thicker clot, and thicker until it's irreversibly clotted. Chronic high blood pressure leads to atherosclerosis. High pressure disrupts laminar flow in arteries, especially around bifurcations like the carotid and the coronary artery bifurcations. Laminar flow is the smooth flow of blood in blood vessels. This disruption of laminar flow is perceived by the endothelial cells as vascular injuries, such that they shed their glycocalyx and start to express prothrombotic molecules on the outer cell surface, and a clot forms. There isn't any difference between a blood clot and atherosclerosis. Atherosclerosis is a blood clot. So I've got an interesting video for you to watch. Short little video. Here is a video from a scientist called Dr. Swank. This is a video of the blood flow in a hamster. The red blood cells are initially flowing freely and independent of each other. But now, after being fed a high-fat meal, this is called blood sludge. As the red blood cells stick together, you can see a drop in oxygen delivery to the cells. As the red blood cells stick together, you see a drop in oxygen delivery to the tissue. Dr. Swank measured drops in oxygen parcel pressure of up to 30% after high-fat meals due to this very process. As you can see, it looks like a major traffic backup in your bloodstream. This is one of the reasons why people are always so tired all the time. If they change to a low-fat, high-carbohydrate vegan diet, they'd always be high on energy. That's horrifying, that, isn't it? What do you think? Yikes. The number one cause of diabetes is insulin resistance from a high-fat diet. A high-fat diet inhibits the inner mitochondrial membrane. Fat paralyzes the insulin receptor. The mitochondrial membrane sends a message to the insulin receptor saying that it will no longer accept any more glucose into the cell. The yellow arrow here indicates where the disruption occurs. The first detectable findings of insulin resistance is the accumulation of fat in skeletal muscle cells, as shown by Dr. Sweeney 100 years ago. Again, animal products are high in fat. Starch and fruit are low in fat. And also, type 1 diabetes is now very clearly being linked to the consumption of dairy milk. Therefore, if you're ever planning on having children, I would recommend never giving them dairy milk. Lack of oxygen to the cells. What is chronic disease? This is called hypoxic ischemia. When you open up your arteries and improve blood flow to your tissue, chronic disease, it goes away. Your cells need oxygen to survive. Just think about it. What is a heart attack? It's cells in the heart dying from lack of oxygen. What is a stroke in the brain? It's cells dying from lack of oxygen. The food that I recommend counteracts this effect. Your body will become more aerobic in your cells because you will increase the efficiency of your blood. This is important as it will decrease your risk of cancer. Okay, I'm coming near the end now, so don't worry. It's getting very bitty, I know, but you've probably never heard of this stuff before, and I think you all need to hear about it. The Otto Warburg metabolic theory of cancer helps to understand how we can reduce the risk of cancer. I have to first note that anyone can get cancer. That's just the lottery of life. However, if you want to reduce the risk of getting cancer, then the best way to increase your odds is through diet change. When you deprive your tissues of oxygen, they become hypoxic. The idea is that the origin of life came from the sea. Billions of years ago, there was no oxygen, so the first primordial life on Earth had to function in an anaerobic environment, like through glycolysis. Then cyanobacteria developed photosynthesis and started producing oxygen. Then we had the endosymbiosis event, whereby an ancient anaerobic cell engulfed an aerobic cell. Therefore, the initial eukaryotes, cells with a nucleus and a mitochondria, had the capacity of being a facultative anaerobe. This means that they could switch back from oxygen metabolism and non-oxygen metabolism. Aerobic respiration produces 18 times more ATP than aerobic metabolism, so there's a big energy advantage. This facultative anaerobic capacity kept the cells alive in times when oxygen supply was low. All cells in the human body have the same DNA. Your immune system, for example, has the ability to go anaerobic. For example, so white blood cells, for example, they have the ability to go anaerobic when they go deep into a wound in an infection to try to heal it. Normally, they're supposed to switch back to aerobic metabolism when they're in the lymph node. The function is buried deep in the DNA of all human cells and their pathways. You have 3.3 billion base pairs in your DNA, and the genes for the conversion of aerobic to anaerobic exist in your cells. These genes can be turned on in the setting of hypoxia. High-fat meals lead to hypoxia in the cells of your tissues. The gene expression of a normal cell changes to that of a cancer cell, by switching from aerobic respiration to anaerobic respiration. This means instead of using the mitochondria, they only use glycolysis to produce ATP. When a cell is in this state, it is essentially immortal because it can keep on living indefinitely without oxygen. A normal human cell is well differentiated. A liver cell does what all other liver cells do. They detoxify the blood and they help maintain blood glucose levels for your brain when you're sleeping. All a cancer cell ever wants to do is grow and stay alive. A cancer cell is a cell that has been starved of oxygen, then switches to glycolysis to survive. A low-fat vegan diet increases blood flow to your tissues, and your tissues become more aerobic. Therefore, the potential of the gene expression of a cell switching permanently to glycolysis is reduced, which reduces the risk of cancer cell formation. Another reason for high carbohydrate intake, as I've already stated, is that all cells run on sugar, and that is true also for your immune system. If you want to produce immune system cells, such as white blood cells, and have a healthy, strong immune system, then a high carbohydrate lifestyle will support your immune system to deal with potentially cancerous cells. The immune system deals with millions of cells every day, so you don't want to increase the chance of a cell slipping through the net. Just another 5 minutes and we're almost there. Does sugar cause cancer? A high-fat diet increases the risk of developing cancer. Sugar does not cause cancer. A high-fat diet increases the risk of developing cancer, heart disease, diabetes, hypertension, and atherosclerosis. All this fat at the center of disease. Can everyone see how it's all linked? If you want to be healthy, but you only take away 1 point away from this talk, I want it to be this, okay? Don't use oils. Just to get it in, okay? No oils, okay? No oils. The food that I recommend contains fiber. Fiber stops you being constipated, which stops abdominal diseases like diverticulitis. However, the most important reason to eat fiber is to maintain your tight junctions in the gut. The lining of your gut is only 1 cell thick to allow efficient absorption of nutrients. If you don't get enough fiber, the good gut bacteria cannot make enough healthy fatty acids that your gut then uses to maintain this cell lining. Low fiber diets cause leaky gut. This is when gram-negative bacteria, or also known, you've probably heard them as bad gut bacteria, get through your cell lining and into the blood, which leads to chronic inflammation in the body. Leaky gut is actually a major contributor to autoimmune disease. You should eat a low-protein diet to protect your kidneys. The first question you should always ask about an organ system is, what does it do? The kidneys excrete nitrates. This is their main function. Nitrates only come from protein. There's no nitrogen, carbohydrates, or fat. So the workload of the kidneys is primarily to excrete nitrogen. If you want to increase the lifespan of your kidneys, you should reduce your protein intake immediately. The other thing that the kidneys do is to balance your blood pH. To decrease the workload of your kidneys, you should avoid the most acidic foods. Animal products will make your blood more acidic. This acidity comes from sulfuric acid, which is released as a byproduct from the digestion of the sulfur-containing amino acids, also found in high quantities in animal products, especially in dairy milk. These are the amino acids methionine and cysteine. The body uses alkaline material to neutralize this acid. And where do you find most alkaline material in the body? The bones. The body dissolves the bones to buffer this acid. And as a result, over your lifespan, you will urinate your bones out into the toilet. When the kidneys filter the blood, the calcium that is released from your bones dissolving away drops out of the blood and is deposited in the tubules. This is why so many people are developing kidney stones and why almost 90% are calcium-based. Milk does not give you strong bones. Milk is highly acidic. Milk consumption leads to weak bones and eventually osteoporosis. Calcium supplementation also does not increase bone strength. Fruits make your body more alkaline. There is something called the potential renal acid load, PRAL for short. This is an indicator of how much acid load is put upon the kidneys, and in general, animal products are always bad. Sweet potatoes, however, are particularly good on the kidneys with a low PRAL score. The hardest thing about being healthy and fit is watching the people around you destroy their health via ignorance, by apathy, or by fear. Being vegan is about living a life that results in a world with the least possible suffering. Animal products are an analogous to how the world works. Animal protein is destroying people's health and it's destroying our environment. I wasn't born vegan, but by ditching my old lifestyle that included consuming animal products has led to more fulfillment and joy in my life. Now that you all know the truth, it's time to spread the message. Time is short to make the world a better place. And I'll leave you with this. Yesterday is history. Today is the present. This is why, start again. Yesterday is history. Tomorrow is a mystery. Today is the present. This is why we call it a gift. Thank you for listening. And if you've got any questions, I'm here to help. Thank you. If you want, I'll stay for 5 minutes and you can ask me any questions, or you can go. The reason why I added so much detail was because whenever, I see articles, they pop up online, most of it never ever gives you the scientific understanding to understand, well, why is this person, telling me this food is good or bad? It's just, well, my friend, he told me this food was good because it was an article or whatever. So there was a lot of detail in that. And, I do personal coaching for people. I do meal plans, and part of the thing I do is I go over this with people because I think a lot of people, they actually want to know, well, why are you telling me to not eat milk? Why are you telling me not to eat fish? Everyone is always told that these are the healthy foods, and that was that's the basic of understanding why I teach what I teach.